All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, brothers and sisters. We have an exciting show for you tonight. Many of you have probably already seen a lot of buzz in the vloggernacle regarding a new show that is kind of, well, shall we say, friendly toward progmos, exmos, and anti-Mormons, called An Inconvenient Faith. Many of you may have also come across the guest for this live stream, the Haystack, who actually sent out a video regarding this, just some of his initial reactions. I have him here with us today. How you doing, John?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Good.
Um,
So,
yeah, I go
this is
ahead.
a weird show.
Yeah. So the thing is, actually, Steve Pinecker with Mormon Book Reviews, he actually just did a panel discussion about some of the people who are on that thing called the Inconvenient Faith, a
Hmm.
new docu series going through the nuances of the Latter Day Saint belief from people who have left and people who have chosen to stay. So all of these people having faith crisis.
Right.
He called me up the other just late last night and informed me who it was funded by because that had been kept a little bit silent,
Hmm.
and gave me a little bit of more background concerning it, which we get into later. But,
Yeah. So, kind of give a brief overview of kind of your initial thoughts for the show. I have mine, but I can get a bit long-winded too, as many people already know. So what we're so now that we have all 9 episodes out, we've probably seen a lot more than we probably ever thought that we would. What are some of your initial thoughts now?
well, I've seen the first 6 episodes. I watched it the day it came out. I saw it being promoted very heavily from some very progressive Latter Day Saints,
Hmm.
some highly progressive, I should say. But so I had some preconceived ideas of, okay, what is this? I kind of have a good idea what this might be, but I'm going to look at it, do my due diligence. The docu series is called An Inconvenient Faith,
Right.
which you think like faith is you're acting upon what you believe or what you hope to be true, but it's inconvenient if you're going a different direction. But it's definitely hard and worth it. So that's one my immediate take on just the title. The first 6 episodes were, one was an introduction of what it was about, and two was the Book of Mormon. And episodes 3 and 4 are on LGBTQ matters, which seems to
Mm.
be the audience's favorite area of this series. Episode 5 is on race, and episode 6 is on women in the priesthood. And their goal is one, to foster better understanding and empathy for those who struggle with these challenges. I'm assuming these, they mean the
Right.
titles of each of these episodes. And two, present honest and ethical approach to remaining faithful and active while staying fully informed. So this was fully funded by Robert Reynolds, who is an active member of the church, who also had a faith crisis, but he wanted to get this out there, and he wanted to keep that to himself. But after some admonition from uh, Steve Pinecker with Mormon Book Reviews,
Hmm.
he ended up making a statement. Uh, so that's what this is structured on, and so the audience, you get a good idea of what the audience is gaining from it through the comments section. But I also just watched it, and it seems all the members participating, of course, all had faith crises, but they all seem to be leaning more of a progressive tone.
Hmm.
And so ultimately, I think an honest and good takeaway is that it's probably going to confirm what everyone's preconceived ideas or where they're currently at. It'll probably just confirm that. I'm not sure what more it will do, and I don't want to get too much into that uh, because there's a lot I could say on that too. So I'll
Right.
turn it back to you.
Yeah. So, see again, like just looking at the description that you just read, like I I can't help but feel this is a bit dishonest based on these episodes and everything like that, because they give a lot of credence not just to the progressive side of things, to essentially trying to get people to not just doubt the church but also doubt the brethren, the prophetic revelations that they claim, and a lot of things that they just cannot seem to reconcile. They almost seem to still be in those faith crises. And then, even then, the way that this is painted, the way that the active members, or at least those that claim to be active, are portrayed, at least in my mind, with the way this is edited, with the way this is presented, it almost makes it seem like those who remain active within the church are stupid. And that kind of rubs me the wrong way. Admittedly, like, yeah, with Reynolds doing what he does and trying to say, like, look, we're trying to make sure that everybody, has a place here. Great, but having a place within the church, this whole idea of big tent Mormonism, the only way that would work is if it comes at the expense of truth, and it comes at the expense of the revelatory prowess that the church holds. And it just seems that there's more credence, like those who have left the church, like Jeremy Runnels and John DeLynn, for instance. Those are two very prominent faces throughout this entire series. Are seen as the smart ones, the go-tos, the thought leaders, so to speak.
They're the level-headed ones to offer you clarity.
Right, but anyone else, and anyone who dares speak against them, they're knuckle-dragging Neanderthals. Like, just the way this was framed, it just doesn't seem like it's very honest here.
Well, I will say that the goal of some of the participants may not have been the same goal of Robert Reynolds. I think Robert Reynolds is offering a very genuine, honest concern, and he's trying to be transparent. As far as I know, I've never talked to him personally. I hear good things. But at the same time, we do know that there is a subtext to many of these other people.
Yes.
And we do have a history of their attacks against the church, their justifications for extracurricular activities. And the funny thing is that a lot of the backlash that these guys got on their video was saying that they didn't go hard enough against the church, and that they didn't include enough people who wanted to be included in it, who had left the church, prominent ex-Mormon podcasters.
Well, and so, like Jim Bennett, who's also another prominent face on here, who's kind of got a little bit of a controversial view on his own. Had he promoted this on X, and one of the things when someone asked when this was being presented, he said, they asked, super interesting, would you say this series leans more toward faith promoting, neutral, or something else? And he said, I think it's something else. It gives everyone a fair hearing. And I'm just going to interject here. No, it really doesn't. But the focus is on how people navigate their faith, knowing all the challenges. I don't think there's ever been anything like this. I can think of a few things that have been like this.
All of Mormon stories.
There's all of Mormon stories, but even going all the way back, I mean, what could be the one who walked so John DeLynn could run? Ed Decker with something like the God Makers, and that's what it feels like. The editing, in particular, the way that these interviews are edited feels very similar to the God Makers in the early '80s, and the same could be said with like the PBS show. And again, just the way that this is edited and the way that people are presented and viewed in this show just makes it seem like, again, like those who have left the church and have nothing really good to say about it. But even those things that they find good to say about it, they find a way to spin it so that it's actually a bad thing. They're the level-headed ones, like you said. Yeah.
It sounds like they're in a human resources interview and they're trying to
justify their behavior.
Trying to things up nice.
Yeah. But
some of us treat podcasts like going out.
Well, I mean, it depends on where you're going out, though, Jonathan. I mean,
Spend time with the lion.
Well, lions try
Like
to
to treat
hide in
things
the
like a
haystack.
vacation.
There you go. But no, like, and that's kind of my major gripe with this is that the only ones who seem to be presented in a positive light are those that want to present the church in a bad light. Like, and
It's
that's the thing here.
but that's funny that you say that because on their end, they're getting criticized for not going hard enough against the church,
Yes.
as if that was the expectation. So you have to ask yourself, who's the audience here, and what's
Hmm.
the expectation?
Well, and that I think is very telling, right? Because like if from the way that this is presented, it does seem like it is presented more toward those who may be more progressive within the church or those that are leaning toward leaving. And the
They
fact
would
that those people are the ones that are lambasting this show for not going hard enough against the church is very, very telling.
well, the people who would be wanting to go harder against would be a progressive mindset.
Right.
That's the most susceptible to uh, deteriorating, falling away. It's
Mm-hmm.
because they give into these worldly, like this expectation that the church will one day alter its revelation or receive new revelation. In my opinion, that's emotional or social revelation. It's not divine revelation. And they do use the idea that, well, many things have changed already. Look at, and I know Jacob Hansen has already
Mm-hmm.
gone into this in a lot more detail, far more eloquently than I can. I'm not good at jujitsu, and I'm not a good verbal judo artist, so I can't do what he does. But so I would refer you to his video that he did on that
Mm-hmm.
recently, if you wanted to look into all the step-by-step details. But here, these guys, I think Jeremy Reynolds, who did a response to the CS letter, I think he was also instrumental in editing this, if I understand correctly.
Jim
This whole
Bennett, you mean?
Jim Bennett, yes,
Yes.
Jim Bennett, and Jeremy Reynolds is the one who authored this.
Jeremy Reynolds was the one who authored the CES letter. Jim Bennett was the one who wrote a response, which I have to say, I don't really get the hype behind Jim Bennett's response to the CES letter. I really don't. Every time I read it, I come away feeling empty. I always want to go back to Michael Ash's response, at the very least. Michael Ash's response, I feel, is a bit more substantive than Jim Bennett's, because
Is he the one who wrote the response, the truth and light? Who
no,
did that?
that's Austin Fife. That's Austin Fife.
Austin Five.
Yeah.
Read his response.
Yes. If you want a really good response to the CES letter, read the Light and Truth letter. It's really good. But before the Light and Truth letter, there was Michael Ash's Bamboozled by the CES letter. That was actually really, really good, and I felt was so much more substantive than Jim Bennett's was. But for whatever reason, Michael Ash is just kind of stuck in the shadows, while Jim Bennett got a little bit more notoriety. But his notoriety has since come as a result of some of the locking of the horns between him and Jacob Hansen in particular, and really just a lot of people who aren't on the progressive end. And like Jim as far as him being a part of the Tabernacle Choir, okay, yeah, fine. But he tends to run his mouth to the point where I feel like he's eventually going to be he's going to be signing a check his butt can't cash.
That's something I picked up from his latest interaction with Jacob Hansen.
Mm-hmm.
It was this so-called uh, brethren. Like, do you feel like the brethren support you? And he's kind of using Aaron Sherinian as he's choosing to take offense over
Right.
Aaron Sherinian as this fulcrum to try and dismantle everything about Jacob Hansen. The thing is, Jacob does a lot of good, and just to why would anyone try to attack the good that is being done and think
Right.
of him as unempathetic? Jacob's own personal life is expressed that he is very well rounded and understands the difficulties and nuances of these different faith crises.
Well, and to both Jacob and Jim's credit, I think this is one of the things where they both are kind of short-sighted on, because Jim is part of the Tabernacle Choir. He's not exactly always privy to the business side of things. But I used to work for the church in church broadcasting for about 5 years, and I worked there from 2013 to 2018. And one of the very first lessons that I ever had to learn was that there is a marked difference between revelation from on high and a business decision. Even if those decisions come from the first presidency and the quorum of the 12, there is a marked difference between the two. I mean, heck, do we really think, for instance, that the brethren are going to the Lord every single time they want to change the type of toilet paper is on Temple Square? Like, no, no, they don't. And just like I don't think it's always the case what they are consulting the Lord as far as who to hire, even in a position that is somewhat close to them. We have examples within church history where they have hired someone who was close to them, who end up turning out to be who could be considered a part of false brethren. Where
Yeah,
they have,
Judas handling the financial affairs.
right. Right. Well,
It's not the first time.
no, it's not. It's not the first time, and it likely won't be the last. So just because someone may have, the brethren may have had a hand in hiring Aaron Sherinian, and may have instructed the HR department to headhunt him like they did, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was a revelatory thing. It could have been, but to me, it has all the hallmarks of being a business decision. Because let's face it, Aaron Sherinian is really good at his job. He is excellent at his job as a communications professional. Now he had
He really
some
knows how to
flaws.
he really knows how to have a foot in Babylon.
So to speak, yeah. But I
He
mean,
knows how to not offend the devil.
right, and
Or try
that's
to
the and that's the thing though, is that, like, he's very good. But the thing is though, is professionally speaking, Aaron Sherinian is good at his job. We have to give him credit there.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that, again, his hiring was revelatory. It could have been just the brethren needed, okay, we need someone who is really good at the job for church communications. The last guy died. What are we going to do? Well, let's get this guy,
Well, did you believe your hiring was revelatory to some extent?
No. No. It certainly was a blessing, but I don't think revelation had a part to play in it with the hiring managers, like, at all.
I think people, no matter their position, who they are, or even their ability, uh, whatever ability they do have can equal amount tip to one side or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So I think anytime someone even gets a calling, doesn't mean that they're the best at the job either. It even means that they could probably be severely flawed.
Right.
But it is opportunity for the Lord to refine and for you to serve, and so. Yeah,
well, and sticking on the like the church employment thing, like we had a very similar discussion when I was doing my undergrad, where there were a lot of people. This is when Kim B. Clark was president of BYU Idaho, and anyone who dared criticize his policies was seen as criticizing the brethren, just like what Jim did to Jacob with Aaron Sherinian. And they're like, well, you can't criticize him. He was called to this position. Well, first of all, this isn't a calling, first and foremost, and second, his calling at the time as the Area 70 was different as his job as the president of BYU Idaho, and so a lot of the things that were really rubbing people the wrong way, especially on the alumni side, was really starting to grind on people, and it took people speaking up and saying, hold on a second, this isn't right. And and eventually, like, the brethren did take notice, because, like, okay, we hired this guy to do a job, and he's doing an okay job, but he's really dropping the ball here. And so they did, and I know for a fact that the brethren actually did speak to then President Clark. And one of the things that was part of the big controversy was removing the vestiges of Rick's College. Again, that did not sit well, still does not sit well with a lot of the alumni. And they kind of acquiesced, like, okay, we can't erase our history. Here's a wall in the cafeteria kind of deal. This ought to appease it. It appeased no one. It was a bit of a cop out, but whatever. There was something. Um, but that's kind of the thing, is that like when push comes to shove, the people that we are asked to sustain are not the people that are hired. We are called to sustain the brethren, the first presidency and the quorum of the 12 in particular. And that's another thing that I want to get on that. But we're asked to support them and sustain them in their callings as prophets, seers, and revelators, as far as communicating the mind and will of the Lord and how to present the ecclesiastical affairs of the church, not how things are communicated through press releases.
In fact, we could see a lot of how things are communicated, tampering down on the brethren, saying you can't say that here or don't
Right.
record that here. So there's a lot of gatekeeping by the communications department, in my opinion.
Yes, there absolutely is. Well, and the thing is too is that like this is another thing when it comes to language, and this is one of the things that I have to criticize Jim Bennett on, with using imprecise language in his conversation with Jacob Hansen on Stephen Pineker's channel a few weeks ago. He was saying that the brethren, don't appreciate what you're doing. They think you're driving people out of the church. Like, okay, when you hear
What brethren is he talking
what
about? 'Cause
brother,
it's not the 15. It's
right?
definitely
And
not.
this is the thing when it comes to precise language, right? When you hear someone say the brethren, what immediately comes to mind? Who immediately
The
comes to mind?
15.
The 15, the first presidency and the quorum of the 12. And so when Jim Bennett is saying the brethren, we immediately think, oh, wait, there's someone in the first presidency or the quorum of the 12 that don't like what Jacob's doing. Holy crap. But wait, no, the lid got blown off of that when he communicated with Ryland, Ether's elephant, and said, well, it's not really them, but it is a general authority. When people mention brethren within the church, they're not talking about 70s or young men's presidencies, Sunday school presidencies, or anything like that. They're talking about the two quorums that are equal in authority in accordance with Section 107. They are the first presidency and the quorum of the 12. If you're talking to like some 70 and they don't appreciate what someone like Jacob Hansen is doing, who cares?
Plus, we have to understand how things actually function. And we do have committees within the church. We have
Right.
70s that function committees that go and answer and respond, report to one of the 12. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, this is something I actually asked Elder Betnar about as a missionary, and then he went on he went on forever talking about the callings of prophets and how revelation is received. I specifically asked about revelation being received among the 12,
Right.
and he mentioned about how the Lord prepares his prophets. He prepares the hearts and the minds. A lot of these people are 70s or have been working in a program. And he used the example of Gordon B. Hinckley and all these smaller temples coming about and being built up like crazy. Like, that wasn't Gordon B. Hinckley. We attribute all that to him because he was the president at the time.
Right.
But that was initiated by an earlier prophet. But he was working among the 70 in these council meetings and everything, and worked their way up. So when I hear Jim Bennett specifically talk about the brethren, I'm thinking about a select few alumni who are very progressive, that are good friends with the same people, same wards. They go on vacation together, maybe. Uh, they like to have their rainbow flags and feel comfortable about that.
Right.
And that's the thing, is these are people who are accustomed to fitting in Babylon. They're accustomed to not offending the devil. And that's not to say anything against their calling. That's just the way things are. That's the environment everybody is in.
Right.
And so I think you get a couple of these people who may have not liked maybe something that Jacob said, and then Jim takes and expounds on that.
Right.
And when it may not even reflect, they don't appreciate Jacob Hansen, what he's doing. Look at how many people have returned to the church and how much he's offering. Like, all these subjects that they've talked on, Jacob Hansen's talked on, Ward Radio's talked on it.
Yeah.
We've talked about these things. And I've learned more from those people than I did in this docu-series.
Yeah.
In fact, they've gone over it a lot better and very openly, freely, without and they bring people of opposing views on to discuss these things. We don't really see that so much
No, no, we don't. Well, and and this kind of ties back to the show, An Inconvenient Faith, right? Like with Jim Bennett being so heavily involved in it as he has been, one of the things that he's actually was asked is that is there going to be multiple seasons? He wants there to be, but he hasn't heard anything of it. Honestly, I'm content with it being just this 9-episode miniseries. Because one, I don't necessarily know what other directions these folks can go on these issues, because it's all the same talking points that we come across. I mean, in the discussions that I have on TikTok, it's all the same tropes over and over and over again. And then it's and then you have folks like Jim Bennett, like Patrick Mason, Brendan Flowers, like all these folks who are technically still a part of the church, but having to navigate all these things. Like with Brendan Flowers, it's understandable because of the industry that he's in. But then you have Patrick Mason and Jim Bennett, who given their chosen profession, like Jim Bennett labels himself as a historian, but I'm not entirely sure if that's entirely accurate. Maybe amateur armchair historian, but yeah,
I'm an armchair historian.
yeah,
I can do that
hey,
too.
so am I. For all intents and purposes, so am I. I have the same credentials as Jim does.
Me too.
But
That's great.
but that's the thing is and that's not to disparage the things here. I mean, I have an interest in history, so do you. And but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're given the credentials behind them. But that's what this whole show is about. It's placing credentialism above revelation.
Yeah, yeah. This feeling of social or emotional revelation to
Mm-hmm.
change things and not inspired revelation.
Well, and their entire shtick is is bottom up revelation, right? Like we have this entire concept of how revelation is supposed to work. I mean, we're studying the Doctrine and Covenants this year, for crying out loud. We're seeing how revelation works. Very
Mhm.
rarely does it actually happen because someone outside of Joseph asked a question. But even then, when it comes to someone demanding a revelation be given, very rarely is it ever given. At the same time, it's that same type of principle as he that seeks after signs is a liar and adulterer already in his heart. But that's the thing, is that these folks are wanting bottom up revelation, somehow confusing how history has played out with things like the rescinding of plural marriage and the priesthood ban and things like that, and saying that this all came because of outside external pressure, and then they just had a revelation to back that up. No, there were plenty of other factors involved, but to suggest that that these are examples of bottom up revelation is absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah, I think they probably know what they're doing, or they're doing this ignorantly. But we saw what happened with Martin Harris and the lost manuscript. The Lord had already given an answer, and this is the thing: is we've already been given an answer on some of these revelations,
Mm-hmm.
all of these revelations. Yet they want to push it, and then on top of that, they don't want to forgive uh, these things either.
Right.
They want to be able to hold it over your head. So there's no testimony of Christ in there, anyways. And my whole view is like my heart goes out to Robert Reynolds, and I want to see if he's actually meeting the goal that he aspired to do with this. And if he's not, maybe there's other people that he would like to include.
Right.
But we can also see the effects. What I like to see is people go through faith crises. That is essential. I feel that you have some form of faith crisis, because if you're not having really any growth, and my whole point about a faith crisis is that when you're exploring and studying these things, some people are too scared to study it,
Mm-hmm.
and you could say things like Jeremy or like Jim Bennett and go, after learning what I've learned, how can I stay in the church? Instead of doing that,
Mm-hmm.
it's I think it would be obvious. We're taught this in the temple. Adam.
Right.
He is cast out of the garden. He's given commandment, told to make sacrifice unto the Lord. An angel comes to Adam and says, "Why do you do this? I know not, save the Lord commanded me."
Right.
He doesn't have all the answers, but he is being faithful, acting upon. It's funny that it's convenient that they call it inconvenient faith, because we are to remain faithful without knowing the full reason why, for the hope that these things are true. It seems to me it's inconvenient because they hope that things will change to include changes to doctrine. And that's why it's inconvenient, because it's not true.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I just had a thought with this, and it's something that I was like, there's just something is off with this. When you said that, they're toddlers. They're emotionally toddlers. Because well, think about it. Like, how often? Because my wife just gave birth a few weeks ago, so this is always already still fresh in my mind, and thinking
Yes,
back to
remember to say congratulations to him. Let him feel the love. He's not going to
Yeah.
get much sleep.
Oh, of course, yes. But yeah. So, and then thinking back to when my other kids were toddlers, what was the one thing that they always did on top of demonstrating that despite having a 3-foot frame, they had a 7-foot reach. They they were always so inquisitive, but always demanded to know why you had certain rules, why you couldn't do things, why you couldn't cross the street, why you couldn't walk through the parking lot into the store without holding mom or dad's hand. Why? We want the reason now. But like, as parents, we don't necessarily always give the reason. And sometimes it may be because we don't necessarily know the reason ourselves. We just know that it's right.
How do I articulate this to a 3-year-old?
Right.
Give
How
me a
do you
second.
articulate this? Right.
My dad, I used to do the same thing, and my dad would go, and then I would interrupt and go, that's all, folks. And
Right.
I get the crap beat out of me, but but still, that's the thing is it. We have to have enough grace and understanding to recognize each other's
Right.
situations.
And like, these folks, they're acting like those toddlers. Why? This doesn't make sense. It's not fair. And
Victim
yet,
mentality.
and yet, how often does the Lord actually give us explanations? And you using that Adam example is perfect. Like, chef's kiss, in my opinion. The entire concept here
I know.
is that the entire
I
aspect here is
understand.
that it's about obedience. This is about
Exactly.
obedience to the laws that we have, to the doctrines that we have now, and trying to make all these claims like, well, this changed and we were told that it wouldn't. Well, no, this actually did say that they had an end, but there are certain things that are
I was
also tied to
restored.
eternal law, right? I don't think it's an accident, for instance, why this particular series has a 2-parter relating to the LGBT issue. I don't think it's an
Well,
accident.
they did a screening, and they were going through areas where they cover like more studious things like Book of Abraham and everything, and it just wasn't sitting well.
Mm-hmm.
But they're like, no, wait for the LGBTQ stuff. That's when it gets good, because that's a hot topic. It's the fun thing to do,
Right.
right? So they made 2 episodes of it because they just can't get enough of it, because that is the goal. That is where they're
That's the cause du jour.
That's what they want. And the thing is that, like, there's people in the church who have this tendency, the LGBTQ tendency, have that like like I have a desire to, eat a lot of ice cream, but I don't always do. That's a bad one because I eat ice cream still. Smoke weed. I have a tendency to want to smoke weed, but I don't. Like, and that's probably a bad analogy too. But we do have active members who do not act on these things, who do have wives.
Right.
And the thing is I don't imagine that it's easy, but it is possible, and they have found joy in the midst of it. And I have to believe that that comes from God, because my experience working in law enforcement and with mental health is this LGBTQ stuff grows in isolated populations and in deviant sexual behavior and what they're exposed to,
Right.
that grows. The population of this has grown significantly because of the exposure and the environment that's been set. And so I think that what they're trying to do is create an expectation for the church and a familiarity. They're trying to acclimate members to an expectation of receiving this, or else you're a bigot.
Right.
And I think that's what they're trying to do so that they can then go to tolerate it, to accept it, to expect it, and then demand it. And that seems to be even what the prophets taught on the subject.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me so
Weird.
much of what President Monson frequently quoted. While part of the first presidency, and even toward the beginning of his time as a prophet, he quoted Alexander Pope, where he said, "Vice is a monster so frightful, main as to be accepted has yet to be seen." You know, basically, all we have to do in order for something that is demonstrably wrong, something that has been shown repeatedly, not just in previous scripture, but also through modern scripture, like through our modern, living representatives of God. They have pointed out that if we allow this to even the slightest degree, it'll run roughshod over us. The whole aspect of, give them an inch, they take a mile. And we've seen it happen, even within the church, where
Even with our own family. Right?
Yes. And that, I think, is something like they always say, don't shun people, always love them. Absolutely. But love does not mean condoning. And one of the things that I came to realize too, like there were a lot of lessons that I had while working for the church. I was able to have the recognition that the notion of love is not selfish, but is neither passive nor permissive. So when people are screaming, "You must accept me as I am, or you don't really love me," that's not love. That's selfishness.
Does Jesus accept you for who you are?
No.
Well, yeah, like he loves you though, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. But this
But
is the
he
thing.
doesn't. You're not perfect,
Right.
right? So
Well, and how, and like you think
we're
about the
not
Sermon
perfect.
on
We
the
have to
Mount.
grow.
Yeah, you look at the Sermon on the Mount and the Sermon at the Temple, where Jesus says, "Be therefore perfect as I or as your Father in heaven is perfect." And that's the thing. Like, there is now. Don't get me wrong. I mean, when you read the book of Job, it does say that there is a degree of perfection that we can attain in mortality, but we can't receive the kind of perfection that the Father and the Son have. Not
Yeah.
even close. But that's the entire aspect of the atoning sacrifice, and when we accept that atonement, but for that atonement to work, it does require obedience to the laws and ordinances that He has given, including and especially the law of chastity. And so when we have things like, and when things are thrown out, like and I can't tell you the most common ones that are often thrown out at me, whenever this is brought up, is the woman taken in adultery, where like, Jesus, forgave her. Like, well, no, He didn't forgive her. What did He actually say after the accusers went off?
I don't condemn thee.
You're not
Go and
condemned.
don't do it
Go and-
anymore.
yeah, He gave her that opportunity to repent. Not that He
Yeah.
forgave her, because it wasn't time for the final judgment for her yet. But yeah, because so not being condemned is not the same as being forgiven. That those are two very different things. The second is the fact that, like, well, who did Jesus sit and eat with? Well, He ate with those who were considered sinners of His day, the drunkards, the publicans, the harlots, and so on. But the thing is, though, is that those who stayed with Him, and this is the thing that they just don't want to acknowledge here, those that stayed with Jesus stayed because they wanted to change. Jesus came to them to sit with them, yes, but he came to change them. He came to change their hearts. He came to change their souls to become who God wants them to be. Not who they want to be, not to follow their truth, but to live up to his standard. So that, hey, you're not living the way that you're supposed to. Let me help you. That's why he sat with them.
I did see them pull some clips um, from the church.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, one of the clips they pulled, John DeLynn, it pulls a clip of President Holland
Right.
saying, if you're going to deny the Book of Mormon, you have to crawl over and under. And then just at the end of it says, I couldn't think of a more false statement. So like,
right. I
I
laugh. I still laugh at that statement.
So when they use something from the church, it's to serve their purposes or to bat it back, right after the fact. They then bring up President or President Nelson saying we should not condemn people whether they stay or whether they leave. We shouldn't do that, and that's really targeted towards. I get reminded about this all the time, and I don't fault anybody for leaving or having a faith crisis, and I don't want to make fun of them either. But if they're going to toss a bunch of stuff, I'm like recently, I had a short where you have Tommy Lee Jones from Men in Black. He's walking up to the temple because that's the background I put on, and you have Will Smith say, "Is it worth it?" And he says, "Oh yeah, it's worth it if you're strong enough." One of the first comments is, "Been there, done that." And someone else comes in and says, "I guess you weren't strong enough." And I'm but the thing is, like, did you really do that? Been there, done that? Because done that is the last point of the gospel of Jesus, is enduring to the end, is not giving up. I do think that we need to have grace, charity, and love for everybody, but gosh, it's not a one-sided thing either. If you guys who are leaving the church having a faith crisis, one of the things I have found that people who really get deconstructed during the process is they take a huge offense towards the church and the brethren, saying they lied about this or this and this, or this doesn't make sense, or this doesn't fit my new paradigm of social understanding. And so there's no forgiveness, there's no grace, there's no love there. And they feel offended, victimized. They're choosing to be a victim. And this is a very leftist approach of justification and emotional support in lieu of facts. And that's a tactic that the devil uses. We see it time and time again.
But it's effective.
If they had a testimony of Christ to begin with, that would then enable them to have the faith and power to proceed faithfully until further light and knowledge does inevitably come.
Yes.
And that's the main thing I want to portray in this response, is that they're not the only ones who have had faith crises. There are faith crises on all ends, and there's many reasons for staying. And I think one of the biggest reasons for staying is it's an opportunity for faith growth.
Yes. Well, and here's the funny thing, like those that are a part of this, I've actually heard many of them say that, like, unless they are that they're one of those people, you never really had a faith crisis. Like, really? Like, they're all of a sudden the arbiters of what a faith crisis is. And
gatekeepers.
They're gatekeepers. Like, and it's like, you never really had a faith crisis. Otherwise, you'd be, you either would be out of the church or you would have a much more nuanced view of things. You'd be more in the same camp as Patrick Mason. Like, dude, no, not every like those of us that I have known. And in my time on TikTok and the communities that were there, like, you've met many of them, A lot of them, I would say practically all of them, at some point has had a faith crisis at some point and have come out even stronger and are probably among the
Yeah.
more orthodox people within the church and one of the more hardcore defenders of the church. And so when they see people like Jim Bennett or Patrick Mason, and this would include myself. So when I see someone like Jim Bennett or Patrick Mason or those that still are in the church and insist on having that we need to have a more nuanced view. No, like I'm sorry, but what is really nuanced about what is truth and what is not? You're basically saying that like the church is a democracy. It's not. It's a kingdom. It is an absolute monarchy. And we have representatives of the king to convey his will.
So would you say that their goals that they set out to meet with their docuseries, are they meeting them?
No.
The first one being foster better understanding and empathy.
Better understanding and empathy with whom? That's my question.
To those struggling with race, women in the priesthood, and LGBT, and issues with the Book of Mormon.
I would say no, mainly because the goal, at least with the way that it's presented, edited, and so forth, it is geared more toward making people hate the church over those issues, not to foster understanding, but to foster doubt and division.
And for those people who were watching it, all the comments in the videos and even on Facebook of people who were trying to get this out there was, I wish they did more to condemn the church. I wish they did more to expose certain things. I wish I could just lambast all my hate and vitriol and just drool all over this.
Right.
And that's the desired outcome that they didn't get. But they're like, I guess we'll take what we can get. So they already feel like they're the ones being served, but they just weren't served as much as they wanted.
Right.
Which you can never fill that cup.
Well, and it's interesting because in part 1 of the LGBT videos, part 1, this is episode 3. They actually have a segment from then President Uchtdorf, and in it actually there's actually several comments. I'm looking at these comments right now, talking about how it was probably this talk that was perceived as being too friendly to the gays, quote unquote, that led to his demotion from the first presidency when President Nelson came in. Like, I'm sorry, can you have a more ridiculous sounding mindset with that? Like,
everything it's always status based. Have you noticed that? It's always rank based and status based. Like, I don't feel like I have enough authority as a woman in the church. Like, oh my gosh, you realize that our prophet has tons of daughters, has had more than one wife, has worked in the medical industry with families, and like, there's no one more nurturing that I have ever witnessed as a prophet than him, and it's not enough. Even if they get pants in Relief Society and get to be prophet of the church, not enough.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Like, again, it has to do with the preciseness of language that's being used here. I would suspect that a lot of the people who are being interviewed, even though they may not necessarily using precise language, they know exactly what they're saying and how they're saying it. They know exactly how they want to be perceived, and they know exactly how to be presented. And this, I think, is a big problem, where we a lot of the times these folks, I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where a lot of the people who are seen as still active within the church are seen as well-meaning but kind of dumb, honestly. Whereas those who have left the church,
they're still brainwashed.
Yeah,
and there is brainwashing in the church. There definitely
sure. Absolutely, but you know, I think I seem to recall President Nelson having a 2-word term for those folks. So I mean,
lazy learner.
Yes, but and don't get me wrong, the entire concept of lazy learners I think can apply to both people in and out of the church, but I think it applies more to many people within the church than it does out of it. Mainly because
Absolutely.
yeah, and a lot of that is because a lot of folks even within the church now, and I sub for seminary in my area, and so I can't tell you how often I come across, and I've seen kids go from freshmen to seniors and see that change, see that testimony take fire.
Hmm.
But before that testimony lights up, they're just kind of going through the motions and just kind of expect everything to be spoon fed to them. But once that testimony lights, they want to know everything. They are participating. They are diving in. Like, it is very impressive to see when that happens.
Yeah,
Like, even
I've
from the
seen a
substitute
lot.
teacher side.
Yeah, I was a seminary teacher as well, and I saw the students I taught saw them leave on missions,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, "What? I never thought they were going to go on a mission." And
Mm-hmm.
then even teaching youth in my local ward, the kids who were not paying attention the most. I mean, I was surprised when I saw how many people got up to go serve missions because it did not seem like it was going that way. And I remember even talking to him. I later became like the ward mission leader, and I was like, "Can you have you thought about preparing for the mission?"
Right.
Like, and they're like, "No, I feel like I should go to college first, and need to get set up and everything." And I'm like, "Is that well for me? I never had that dilemma. I
Mm-hmm.
was homeless before the mission. I went back to not having a place to stay. I was couch surfing, so I saved up everything I could, put it in. I had an LDS family that took me in prior, but seeing this change, especially when this has been asked of us by
Mm-hmm.
our prophet to engage in the most important work that could ever be done,
Right.
and then Elder uh, Elder Betnar saying, "If all you know is what people tell you or what you read in books, then you will never know enough." So that you will never know enough. And to me, I feel like I cannot recite something perfectly word for word. I struggle with that. I don't have very good memory, but I do remember the things that I learned.
Right.
I do remember what I understand from something. And uh, what I typically understand is somewhere in between what was exactly said and then to me it's and I think this is why there's a lot of confusion and faith crises is
Right.
because we're all working with the spirit through our own individual filters and through filters of our teachers and through filters of the prophets, and there are lots of filters it has to go through, so there does have to be a stillness, a silence, and a tenderness to recognize it.
Well, and I think a big part of it is recognizing the influence of the Spirit as well. Like, this is probably the most major criticism that I have of this entire series. Not once did I hear anything, like, even in the segment on personal revelation, not once did they actually talk about the spiritual growth that comes from adhering to the principles taught by the church, taught by the
Seem very
prophets.
academic.
They're
They
very
don't sound very
apathetic.
academic.
And in fact, like, many of them were deriding revelation. And that's what I thought was actually interesting. Like, they were, poo-pooing the very concept and saying that it was, the whole burning in the bosom thing. It was all subjective feelings. Like, wait, anyone who has actually experienced the Spirit, and it is an experience, um, recognizes that spiritual growth and that spiritual recognition. And this is why I think like, especially in English, feeling the Spirit is such a misnomer, right? Because it's more than just a feeling, and sometimes it's not even a feeling at all. For me, like, yeah, there are sometimes feelings with it, but most of the time it's thoughts, and it's thoughts that I never even considered before, right? But we all have those different ways of experiencing how the spirit works with us. I mean, there are some people who will do it while playing the piano and being in that groove, and then that, like, I don't know if anybody's seen Soul, but that's, it's close enough.
It speaks through the gifts of the Spirit
Yeah,
which they have.
right. And then there's other people who will drive around while the car is completely silent while also muttering to themselves like a madman. So, I mean, yeah. Good, I'm not the only one.
I've given so many lectures,
Oh, there
for
there are
nobody.
times where I will have like full on debates in the car, and then as soon as I come home, I'm still muttering to myself. My wife would like, "So did you win?" So
This is why when you see me do a video and I walk directly outside and I just start talking, it's because I've had things going on in my mind. There's a break in what's going on at home. The kids, are not hectic, and I'm like, okay, I can get this out, and then it stumbles all out. I think this is part of why we're asked to study earnestly from the best books. So the Lord has a plethora of ways to communicate to us the most sincere ways,
Mhm.
in a way that one thing I liked, a little thing I made before the mission was I like to say, the Lord shapes us into the keys that will unlock the hearts and understanding of those people around us through our experiences, our testimony. It shapes and molds us. Our covenant keeping, it shapes us. And we unlock the hearts and understanding of those people around us. So we're around the people we are for a reason. We have those desires for a reason. We just got
Right.
to turn that key.
Well, and that's the thing. It requires action on our end.
Yeah. Faith.
And yeah, absolutely. Faith to act, faith to move. And this is the one thing that I think is so very ironic about this entire series. They call it an inconvenient faith, but there's very little about faith in it. There's very little about the actions that are taken, not just uh to move forward to a better understanding of who God wants us to be, but also recognizing God's hand in everything relating to his church. At least as far as the important things are concerned. I mean, I've come across people who, again, who are active in the church after going through, I guess, a better nomenclature would be a progressive faith crisis, rather than going back to more of a faith renovation, and say that, like, well, God may have had a hand in restoring the church, but he doesn't really have a hand in it now.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
it
and I,
goes.
and I fear that's more common than we realize.
Yeah, the faith crises leave either open sores or a scar, and one of those things is being that they doubted that true revelation came, and that these things were just by the best design of brilliant minds.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so they have this lingering thought, impression, scar that, well, perhaps the church will change again because they did before. Perhaps these people will receive revelation that they don't trust or believe anymore, and they do that through social changes,
Right.
emotional changes.
Well, and that I think is the issue. Like, they want it done through social means. Like, they have this notion that, again, because we happen to live in the West, that protests get things done after all. But their entire shtick is making sure that we do things from the bottom up. It's a very Marxist way of looking at things, to be quite honest. If we want to if we want to bring politics into it, but essentially there's a reason why, like, even so many of these folks would say that they are progressive Mormons, or that they're progressive saints, or whatever. That their political ideology is always first. And I think that speaks volumes about it, where they're willing to put their progressive ideologies first, rather than, hey, I am a Latter-day Saint first and a progressive second. No, they have their progressive ideologies out there in the open, in front of what they claim their religious convictions to mean, And just like with people who are very sharp-tongued in the communications field, so to speak, they are very adept at straddling both Zion and Babylon. But the problem is that if you can't decide on one, you're going to fall to the other. And Zion will be a lot harder to maintain a foothold unless both feet are on that side.
Yeah. And if there's anywhere to feel welcomed and loved, it would be Zion.
Mm-hmm.
But for it to be Zion, it has to be one heart and one mind.
Right.
Thus, it's inconvenient for
Yes.
them if they have their hearts set on something else.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and that's ultimately a huge takeaway.
Yes.
I think you should understand about
yes.
this.
Well, and this entire thing, like I'm going through the comments on these videos right now, like just looking at again, we'll look at episode 9, personal revelation, right? Like the entire concept of personal revelation here. Okay, so we have so this is actually a pretty good one where I think this is one where it hasn't had a response to it. 4 days old, which is surprising. But so this is TK Shop or TK Hop from 4 days ago. No response to it, which again is very surprising. They say, you say our goal is to 1, foster better understanding and empathy for those who struggle with these challenges, and 2, present honest and ethical approaches to remaining faithful and active while staying fully informed. That sounds good in principle, but the execution didn't live up to it. And I agree wholeheartedly, but they continue. The series was heavily skewed toward faithful members and apologists, both in terms of screen time and in terms of narrative authority. I do not agree with that. Even when ex-members were shown, their contributions felt minimized, short clips likely edited down, often overshadowed by long, uninterrupted explanations from apologists. And crucially, ex-members were never given the last word. The editing choices always placed apologetic voices as the final authority, which undermines the claim of trying to foster empathy and understanding for those who left. So they have a little bit more, but I want to pause here for a second. Where and this goes back to what you were talking about earlier about how they were getting lambasted by those progressive members or those who have left the church for not doing enough. Like it's one of those things where it's damned if you do, damned if you don't, because the entire framing, at least from the faithful side of things, is that they were framing it in a way that the only logical explanation was that if you were to remain within the church, that you have to be on this progressive side where you believe in bottom-up revelation.
Yeah. And this is being funded and done by a fully active member. Mm-hmm. This is prerogative of what he does. This is, again, people wanting to change what he did.
Right.
And we're just giving an analysis and saying, did it meet that qualification? Where can we step? Because we do want. I'm not unempathetic. I may seem unempathetic, but certainly very honest.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to discuss these things without offending people who are constantly wanting to be offended.
Right.
So that's what makes discussing any of this and having a Zion peaceful discussion, anything like this, very difficult to do.
Well, and this I think is one of the things where, like, again, those goals I think were stated fine, but if neither side is feeling like these goals were met, there was something done that was either intentionally or maybe, to be more charitable, unintentionally wrong. Because again, like these no one who is active and faithful, at least those who are not of the progressive Mormon or New Order Mormon types, don't feel like there was a better understanding and empathy to those who struggle with the challenges, but more presented a side that said, if you don't think that in the progressive mindset, you're a moron. Versus the second, present honest and ethical approaches to remaining faithful and active while staying fully informed. Again, like on at least from the faithful side of things, a lot of it didn't seem very honest and ethical to those approaches. Like it felt very browbeating in a way.
I think that's where the conflict comes in of, did everybody share the same mission goal?
Right.
This? And this is probably why Robert didn't want his name connected to it at all, but was pushed into this because a lot of people were saying, "Who's funding this?
Right.
Who's wanting this to change?" And I was part of that. I was, I wanted to know, uh, and I kind of had a feeling that it came from a more progressive end. Uh, I was honestly surprised that it came from an active member.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, is it bad that this miniseries is out? Is it a bad thing?
I
Or are
don't think
people
so.
going to watch us and think we are unempathetic, that we're sexist, or that we hate
I don't
people?
necessarily think that it's a bad thing, but I honestly I don't care. People can think whatever they want about me. Um, but the thing is that like, when it comes to this particular series, one, I hope that's it. Like honestly, because like while it was well shot, well edited, I don't think it accomplished its goals. I really don't. And again, like anyone who is presented as like a fully active member who doesn't see Revelation as being from the bottom up but more from the top down, then the framing to make them look like they're morons or whatever is completely nonsensical. But then to give whatever time that they did to those who have left the church, those podcasters, those psychologists or whatever, um, again, it just didn't ring honest to me. And it obviously didn't ring honest to those who have left the church or those that are of a more progressive bent. Maybe more, I guess, moderate progressives, like some folks we've experienced on Facebook. But yeah, no, I think you're right. Like when it comes right down to it, the fact that Reynolds didn't want his name attached to it, because I think there was a part of him that knew that this was not going to go over well with anyone. Meanwhile, you have folks on like Jim Bennett promoting the hell out of it on Twitter. Like it's like, what are you doing? Really? Like, man.
The focus, when I think about this, I think about the focus of the LGBTQ. And me, my experience, it's a lot of crimes against children tend to come from this community. This community is very susceptible to this type of stuff. I do not want to perpetuate a community that is full to our families.
Right.
Whereas our kids are in primary and they're singing things about, having strength, finding
Mm-hmm.
a peaceful place to have their own sacred grove. They're the heroes that they have are these prophets who have gone through difficult things. Why can we not love that? And how can we do? Why would we ever think to introduce something so damaging and damning
Right.
as acclimating uh, families to LGBTQ agendas?
Well, yeah, it makes no sense. Like, because again, we've seen what has happened. Like, I don't know about you, but I remember when Prop 8 was, because I was living in California at the time after my mission,
Me too.
and Prop 8 was huge at that point in time. Um, and I was still living at home with my folks. Yes, I was a returned missionary, still living with my parents, whatever. Um, but when this was going down, like I remember the protests. I remember like especially the commercial that aired the election day of the so-called Mormons coming to take away people's marriage rights. But then like when people had even suggested like, well, think about the slippery slope this is going. Oh, this is just a slippery slope fallacy. It's never going to happen. Meanwhile, look at what's happened more than 15 years later. Like almost 20 years later at this point. What has happened since Obergefell? Like you look at how society has become and just how bad it's gotten. I mean, people are sick of it.
The thing is Prop 8, I was part of the other group.
You were part of the
It was
no.
I was part of the people who had I had left the church because I really love smoking weed and cigarettes and hanging out with. I worked for punk rock bands. I
Right.
hung out with, you know, I found myself among famous people without realizing it often.
Mm-hmm.
One of these occasions, I remember driving on an SUV, coming back into Escondido, getting off the freeway, and seeing a bunch of these Prop 8 signs, and everyone in the car I was with, punk rockers, all giving them the middle finger, and I just jump in with them, like, yeah. And then I look and see who it is. These are people who I knew from the singles ward when I went inactive, and I locked eyes, and I just pulled back, and I just felt, what am I doing? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what happened? And it really took me a moment to look at my open space, because before that, I'd be happy to, me and my guy friend, we just grab hands and we'd skip, like we weren't gay or anything, but we wanted to antagonize it.
Right.
And but when I actually learned more about it, I was like, gosh, I'm so stupid.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really because I had any devotion to it. It was just because I was sympathetic to my
Mm-hmm.
friends who had devotion to it.
Right.
And I was stupid.
Well, I mean, based on what you just said, it's very possible that you and I may have crossed paths at some point. You know, because I was
Dude,
I was in Southern California too, like right near the border. So, you know, so
do you know
the
the Comeback podcast?
Yeah.
Your girl?
Yeah.
She's familiar. I don't know why, but she is super familiar.
She is. She so is. I have a hard time placing her though.
I think I probably saw her at church dances, maybe seminary. We crossed paths.
Maybe. I don't know,
I,
man.
I know her face, but I don't know if I know her. One embarrassing thing I did run into is I remember at a dealer's house, and I saw one of my friends from church.
Uh-oh.
His much younger sister walked into the house, and I was like,
Oh no.
no, we're not doing this. No, no. I got pissed off. I'm like, no, get out. We're not doing this. Get out of here. No, no, we're done. Stop.
Well, that's
And
good. Get her out of there.
but that's just destructive, and how blinded people can be simply because they're sympathetic to something.
Mm-hmm.
We need these reality checks. There's a reason. There's a word of wisdom. There's things that teach us to have clarity.
Well, I mean, we studied all that last week, so I mean,
Yeah.
but but here's kind of the thing, though. I mean, this entire saga, yes, 9 episodes have been released. Let's hope that's the only 9. But this entire saga hasn't necessarily come to an end. Apparently, there was a very recent, like within about a few hours of before we even started this broadcast, of Steven Pinecker actually interviewing 4 of the people who were involved with with an Inconvenient Faith, and you seem to have a little bit of insight on that. I haven't seen that video yet, but you've heard a little bit of it. You've spoken to Steven about that. Like, what are some of your thoughts regarding what he said?
Yeah. So Steve called me last night and just gave me I love Steven. I absolutely love Steven. And so we call and chat every now and again. And he called me up last night and was talking about how he's going to do this panel discussion. What they're going to talk about. In fact, there's a lot of things that Jim Bennett says. Like every time Jim Bennett says something in a video, I heard it first from Steve already. And I know, and because he wants to gauge and get kind of like, well, what's your view towards these things? And I give him my nuanced view, and,
as nuanced as it can be, anyway.
Yeah, and then he tells me, well, I think the one thing that we wanted to land on is that we simply, no matter what side everybody's on, that we simply have enough grace, charity, and love to shroud each other. This is something I believe Joe Smith had said after someone had spoken. I keep thinking it's John Taylor, but I'm not sure. That someone was criticized, and he admonished and said, we need to be like Shem and Japheth. and
Mm-hmm.
have enough foresight and charity and love and grace to cover the wrongs of others, especially even leaders.
Right.
And so I think about that quite often. And I think about, in no way do I not love any of these people. If Jim Bennett were to call me and ask me for help to move or to do something, if he, whatever it was, even though I don't know him, of course I, go out of my way to help
Yeah,
people. But
same
I
here.
don't dislove anybody. Even people who have left the church, that's my whole family. I love them.
Right.
It doesn't right. It doesn't mean that I am an activist for things that they do that are contrary to the church,
Mm-hmm.
nor do they expect that of me. That would be called ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. But with Steve, he's very communicative. We've been planning to have me on his channel and him on my channel for a long time, and I'm just like, I'll get around to it. I don't do homework very well.
Meanwhile, you and I are like, hey, do you want to talk about this? Sure, let's go live.
Yeah, I'm a very impulsive person. If you haven't noticed, I have so many videos I've prepared, typed out, written, and even filmed that I've just never released. I'm like, I don't
Right.
know. But Steve, I did listen to that video. I put on double speed and listened to it before we did this, and they did you know a debriefing basically of what they had experienced and saying that they didn't do enough or where are areas that they can improve. I would actually suggest listening to that video and watching that, because it does give their view after seeing the responses. And um, again, I think the takeaway is that people who watch this series, they're just, it seems neutral. But they did talk about that they didn't have a goal of taking people away from the church, and they didn't have a goal of keeping people in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they actually met that goal because it seems people are pretty neutral and staying exactly where they are. It's just reaffirming things that people already have. I don't think it does anything to teach anybody, because I've been taught far more. Uh, I've been taught far better
Yeah.
by other channels and through my own personal study and research. So I don't think it does anything to really teach. I didn't feel uh, I didn't feel less or more sympathetic because I am sympathetic to people who leave the church. Um, I do love them,
Yeah.
and I don't think of them any differently. And I support people's decision for whatever plan that they want, because ultimately we value people's choice.
Mm-hmm.
We value that, and I'm not about to take that away or shame people for it.
Right.
I will make fun of people who make fun of us, though. And
Well,
you can
it's
see
just
that from
so
my view
easy.
too.
It's just so easy.
Yeah. And that's my weakness.
Yeah.
And yes, we have weaknesses. We don't walk on water. Shocker, I know.
Oh, what? What? Well, now my shelf is broken, Jonathan. I can't anymore. I just. It's just...
Yeah. But this is the Lord's true church.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason why the Savior teaches what he teaches. And I think if you're struggling with with a faith crisis or with history of the church or anything like that, target your attention towards, do you have a testimony of Jesus Christ, and do you have faith in that? Meaning, are you repenting? Are you forgiving? Are you loving?
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing past other people's foibles and difficulties? Uh, are you, yeah, seeing past those things simply? Because I think that's how we achieve Zion, is where we are directed and to have the same heart and same mind, and not hoping for social change and ascendancy into different programs. It's, do you want that relationship with your father?
Right.
Can you forgive somebody who made a mistake, some growing pains, someone who may have been deceptive? Can you forgive and look past that and see the change? and that's my thing.
Well, and I would say too that those that may be going through a faith crisis right now, and I suspect that there's probably a lot of people who are currently watching this and may watch this in the future. If you are going through a faith crisis, if you can forgive this very clumsy analogy, don't tear down the entire house just because the bathroom needs a remodel.
Yeah.
Only to find out later on that there was nothing wrong with the foundation to begin with. Because that's the entire reason. Like, people will completely deconstruct or tear down their entire house, and then as soon as they find that they're at a place where they can realize, like, okay, I think I'm dead. They cleared out all the debris. They may claim that, like, okay, we've got to fix the foundation. There was nothing wrong with the foundation to begin with, and they tore down the house needlessly. And I think I found that far more often than not for those that actually do suffer with a faith crisis. And again, it's usually because the bathroom is falling apart and just needs a remodel. It needs to be refreshed, or maybe it could be the kitchen or whatever. But the entire house doesn't need to come down because of that. It doesn't. It just needs it may take a little bit more work than you were probably anticipating. But what would you rather do? Remodel the bathroom or rebuild the house? That's the thing that I would say there. There's a lot more good with the church, and yes, there are plenty of warts within the church's history and the way that many people have been treated throughout the church's history. Even now, with the whole concept of bishop roulette, ward roulette, whatever, you're going to come across imperfect people. We're imperfect. We're not going to say that we're somehow all these like traditional sainthoods with halos over our head or whatever, despite our own delusions of grandeur. But we're realistic enough to realize that, hey, we are still imperfect. We make mistakes. We say things that we probably shouldn't have in the way that we shouldn't have. But part of that humility is that when we are wrong, we own up to it. We don't double down. We don't dig in our heels. Especially if that incorrect information is presented to us in a way that is actually believable in a way. But we also need to realize that, like, the people who may be trying to present correcting information to us may also be incorrect as well. It goes back to like one of the more famous quotes from politicians past. Trust but verify. Right.
I will never discourage anyone from studying more.
Yeah.
Just be prepared for what you study, and to me that preparation is centered in, do you have the testimony in Christ first?
Right.
Go from there, because then you can at least forgive foibles and errors of others, and even see, like, you don't get faith crises from studying too much. It's, you get to a point, you take a bite of that, that forbidden fruit, as it seems.
Mm-hmm.
Go forward in faith, continue on faithfully in your covenants, in what you already believe. Further light and knowledge comes, and it comes by authority.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. So I do want to kind of address something that they have on their website, right?
Okay.
Like in many organized religions, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as Mormons, are leaving at an unprecedented rate. What are your thoughts on that?
That's not been my experience.
It hasn't been mine either, quite honestly.
When I left, that was when people were leaving at an unprecedented rate, and you actually see a drop statistically.
Yeah. Well, back in the early 2000s, yeah.
A lot of the people who I looked up to, the most stern, they were strict LDS. Like, these are like these were the Nephi's that I looked up to, and me struggling, and I came back. These guys are all gone. They're more hardened against the church, and they've left. Some of them have left, but it's but the youth today, I don't see the youth leaving.
No.
and they're exposed to far more than any of us ever were.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot of it too, like especially in the early 2000s, had to do with people feeling like they were like the church betrayed them, right? But like even yeah, that was the entire thing. Like that the church betrayed them. That was the feeling. Um, but even then, like we do see a bit of a drop off, but I don't think it was as big of a drop off as many people are willing to paint it. And even now, right? I mean, 2024 was probably the biggest year we've ever had as far as convert baptisms, let alone children of record baptisms. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but like people like statements like this that people are leaving the church as an unprecedented rate. This doesn't really ring true to me, just as it didn't ring true for me then, where there were like for me, I live in the middle of nowhere, like rural Utah.
Rural
The
Idaho.
Yeah, well, there you go. And my experience just living here for the past, just short of 5 years, that the people that the perception may be that people are leaving the church because they're seeing wards and stakes being consolidated. I mean, my folks still live in Southern California, and they've had several wards and several stakes consolidated on them.
Well, that's
Meanwhile, well, no, that's Southern California that they had.
oh, Southern California.
But like
Well,
even then, like even in Salt Lake, right? They're seeing something similar happen where people like are seeing stakes and wards consolidated. Meanwhile, you go out into the more rural areas, we've had new wards added to our stake where there are talks of the stake potentially splitting. Like
mhm.
people aren't leaving the church, they're leaving the cities. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah. Springfield, Missouri. Out there, they were seeing so much growth that it was month after month of splitting the wards, splitting the
Mm-hmm.
stakes. And now they're like, okay, well, we had plans to build a temple here because the growth. But now on top of that, they're like, might have to be a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
We might have to, the city starts widening the road for the temple lot, and they're expanding how big that temple lot is, if I understand
Mm-hmm.
that correctly. My realtor for Springfield is the same one for the church, and so she's telling me how exciting it is with that people are like floods of people are coming into places like Missouri, Tennessee, North
Mm-hmm.
and South Carolina. They're looking at Utah and they're like, so we won over Utah. Woohoo. But the thing is the rest of the nation, the rest of the world is growing significantly. Otherwise, we would not have temples.
Right.
And the goal is to have a temple within an hour of every saint.
Yeah. Well, and
Interesting.
and like I said, people are leaving the cities. They're going to places where they can homestead, or to more rural areas, or places with less than 10,000 people, a population of less than 10,000, as opposed to a population of 5 million. This is what we are seeing. People aren't necessarily leaving the church, especially in the late 2010s and in the 2020s. Again, people are leaving the cities.
People are leaving due to politics.
Well, yeah,
And
but
that yellow dog prophecy,
mm-hmm.
that yellow dog, that's yellow dog Democrat in Missouri. How many Democrats are there left? It's just those two main cities, two, maybe three.
Right.
But the saints out there, the Christians out there, are far more understanding and forgiving and loving to Latter Day Saints than Christians out here in Idaho and in Utah. They hate us. Idaho
Oh yeah.
Christians hate us so much.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know what we did.
Well, like, and the thing is, like, I can say the same thing about Christians out here. I remember going to a non-denominational church for an Easter because one of my wife's homeschooling friends invited us to come, and my goodness, I did not feel more targeted by a single religious leader like I did by that pastor. My gosh, on Easter Sunday, no less. Um, but if things are like that in Missouri, that's a marked difference from how things were 150 years ago. Like, you know, just thinking about that, like nearly 200 years ago now. Um, but again, it just goes to show like how the church is being perceived in these areas. And I can understand, like, in places like, especially, Southeast Idaho and well, Utah in general, like those Christians that just absolutely hate Latter-day Saints. A lot of it has to do with things done in the past. Like my ancestor, um, he actually was in the area that I live now, but he wasn't a member. But he ended up hating the Mormons because he tried to set up a mercantile shop, but all the Mormons were so poor they tried to buy things either on credit or by bartering. It's like I can't eat on barter or on credit. And so, he eventually went off to go to Wyoming, but that hatred passed on to his children. And it wasn't until after his children died that his grandchildren felt safe actually joining the church. And that's where I come from on one side of my family. And I do find it interesting that I came back to the very same area that caused him to hightail it out and go up to Wyoming anyway. Almost a bit of a redemption arc, kind of roundabout way.
It's kind of like my family. We're going back,
right
back out there.
We're
cleansing, restoring.
Right, but this is the circumstance that we're up against here, is that we have a lot of people who are just and this isn't a super chat, but this is something I do want to highlight. Bridger Butler mentions in the comments, years of conditioning by anti-LDS talking points. They literally pay people to come in and give sermons on why other religions are wrong and bad. And that's very true. Like, and we see just like what has happened. I mean, we look at some of these other folks who claim to be coming under the guise of Christian fellowship and outreach, like Pastor Jeff from Hello Saints. And there's some good things and good conversations that he has, but honestly, like if he was, I feel like despite his claims of looking at things honestly, his stated goals and the mask that has slipped a little bit, I feel like if he was truly honest, he would have been baptized by now.
It's funny. I watched the video of him and his wife touring the Saratoga Springs Temple, and his wife was feeling the Spirit. She was saying like the things that she was loving, and then you could see kind of the worry because he's like, no, they're getting to her, like
they're getting to her.
Like he's like, no, I saw the opposite.
Yeah.
So it's he came guarded. I get that. Dr. David A. Falk is an evangelical Egyptologist that I speak to often. He's one of my favorite people to speak to, even though he doesn't think I'm Christian. Still, he'll quote me and say, "That's an excellent point. Yes, that's it. Yeah, but you're not. You're just fooled a little bit."
Oh gosh. I would love to see a conversation between him and Kerry Muhlestein on the Book of Abraham.
They know each other, actually. They've talked about it. In fact, he's helped Kerry Muhlestein on a paper before and is authored on it. But they've had dinner together.
Yeah.
They got along great. He's talked to John Gee, I believe. And the thing is that he comes down to Egyptology, and he's telling what an Egyptian sees, not what an ancient Israelite would see, right. And how they reinterpret, how they recontextualize certain things. Like one point I love to make that nobody else makes is Joseph in Egypt. He would be considered an Egyptian high priest, yet he worshipped the one true God. He lived in a different situation. He was mummified and had Egyptian characters and spells and everything on Jacob's and his tombs. Don't you think that they recontextualized and understood these things to fit their own narrative? I believe so, because we see that with the Jews in Elephantine. We see Egyptian characters have a completely different meaning. We see Abraham substituted for Osiris.
Yeah.
And when you say, well, Joseph said that, well, it doesn't apply to him. There's no way he could have. Like
Rules for
he
thee,
may
but
have
not
known,
for me. Yeah, that's
yeah,
yeah.
he may have known the purposes, but he got the Egyptian name wrong. Like, well, it's written by it's Semitic.
Right.
That's the thing that nobody talks about that I think clears up so much.
Absolutely. Well, we kind of got a little bit off track as far as like
Yeah, sorry.
inconvenient faith a little bit, but honestly, I feel like we've kind of beaten that to death. There wasn't really much there than just kind of complaining and then like the aftermath with Stephen. But so, do you have any final thoughts about an inconvenient faith after having watched as much as you did, as well as the follow up from Stephen?
I think it's appropriately named because it's inconvenient because what they're putting their faith in is not what the reveal what we have.
Right.
They're hoping for something to change to fit more of a social agenda and narrative. So to me, it's just I want to be I want the church to be okay with me being like this.
Mm-hmm.
Thing is, the church loves you. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to change its doctrines for you.
Right.
And so it is inconvenient when your heart is set on something else. And my takeaway is just continue faithful and set it on Christ first and then go forward.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with that. The one thing that I do think is interesting is that again they did not accomplish their goals. They did not. And I think that's pretty clear again by the comments that we see on these videos. We see, again with just how cagey folks were when it came to the funding and who spearheaded this. Like with the way that Jim Bennett in particular was trying to present this, like he was the one. He wasn't just merely involved. He was one of the showrunners essentially, but that's not the case at all.
Whose kingdom are you trying to build? The
Right.
Lord's or Jim Bennett's?
Right. Exactly. So, but there's a lot here. I mean, we both have a lot of opinions, and I think we covered most of them. The issue at hand is we just stay on the good ship, Zion. We have so much to look forward to as far as the church is concerned, and we have a lot more good with the church. Our faith doesn't have to be inconvenient unless you make it so.
Yeah.
We can still have our eyes open to the aspects of history while still recognizing that a lot of the social mores, a lot of the social, the political cause du jours of, just the last 60 years alone are not necessarily in line with what the Lord wants. The church is not some business or some political entity that, we have, you say like we can push things from the bottom up like we can here in the United States. No, we need to recognize that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is a representation of the kingdom of God here on earth. And as such, we need to recognize that, yes, it's an absolute monarchy. That means there are going to be things that you may not like. But because we have a truly good king, he knows what's best for his kingdom so that everybody can benefit, so long as we listen.
And ask yourself, why do I not like that?
Right.
Because it's usually, I don't have a testimony of something yet. Gain
Or
that testimony.
and a lot of the times that testimony, that what's blocking that testimony is that their political or social views are getting in the way.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that should be about wrap it up. Thanks for coming on, Jonathan. We'll probably be talking more about this, especially if they do come out with a season 2. Oh boy, let's see if that happens. But in any case, thanks for watching, everybody, and we will see you all next time.